She stood there, drenched from the rain, clutching a worn brown envelope like it was the most valuable thing in the world. Security guards tried to stop her at the lobby doors, but she whispered, almost begging, "I'm just returning this envelope." The millionaire looked at her from across the marble hall. He smirked, amused by what he thought was another desperate scam. Without looking up from his watch, he scoffed, "And I suppose I'm supposed to thank you for that?" But that smirk disappeared the moment the real owner of the envelope walked in. Before we dive into this powerful story, make sure to subscribe to your channel name, hit the like button if you believe kindness still exists in the world, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps us bring more heartfelt stories just like this one. It all began on a rainy Tuesday morning in Portland, Oregon. The sky was gray, and the streets were still wet from the night storm. Inside the towering steel and glass headquarters of Miller Enterprises, the mood was as cold as the weather outside. George Miller, one of the city's most influential millionaires, was finishing his morning espresso. Known for his sharp business skills and even sharper tongue, George wasn't exactly famous for being kind. His motto was simple: in business, emotions are useless. And most people believed he lived by that in all parts of his life. At 9:03 a.m., the receptionist announced someone unexpected at the front desk. A young woman, soaked from head to toe, with tangled hair and trembling hands, was standing in the lobby. She wore an oversized thrift store coat and held a faded envelope. She wasn't asking for a meeting. She simply said, "I need to return this to Mr. Miller." Security hesitated. People didn't just walk into the building like that, especially not looking like her. When George arrived in the lobby, he didn't seem bothered at first. He eyed her with slight irritation, checking his watch. "Did you lose your way to the shelters?" he muttered under his breath. She heard him, but didn't react with anger. Instead, she whispered, "I found this outside your building yesterday. It looked important. I thought it belonged to you." He took the envelope without much interest and waved a hand dismissively. "People don't return things these days," he muttered sarcastically. "They keep them." He thought it was empty, but before he could tear it open, the woman spoke again. "It doesn't belong to you, sir," she said gently. "It belongs to someone important." George stopped. His eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" She stepped back nervously but stood her ground. "I didn't open it, but I saw initials. I traced the location to this building. I thought it might be from someone who needs help." At that exact moment, the elevator doors opened, and an elderly man, hunched slightly but dressed neatly, stepped out. His eyes landed on the envelope in George's hand and widened in disbelief. Where did you get that?" he asked shakily. George glanced between them. "You know her?" he said. The old man looked at the woman with soft eyes. "I don't, but I know that envelope. It's mine." The room fell silent. The old man, Thomas Reed, was a retired school teacher. He had once worked for Miller Enterprises decades ago. He had come to the building the previous day to submit a letter of request for financial aid to help his wife, who was battling late-stage cancer. He had accidentally dropped the envelope while leaving. No one in the lobby knew this, not even George, who hadn't seen the letter yet. The woman, whose name was Emily, explained how she had found the envelope by a storm drain while looking for recyclables. She lived in a small shelter and earned money by collecting cans. She noticed the envelope was too clean to discard. She felt something told her it was important. "I spent last night searching online to understand if ME was this company," she said, fidgeting with her hands. "I walked here this morning. I'm sorry if I'm causing trouble." George, who had been silent so far, slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. It said, "Dear Mr. Miller, I know you may not remember me, but I once worked here as an office assistant in 1989. My wife Margaret was the one who used to send fresh cookies to your office on Fridays. She is very ill now with cancer, and our savings are gone. I heard your company has a community fund for medical assistance. I hesitate to ask, but if it is possible, any support would help her live with less pain. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Thomas Reed." As George read the letter, the weight of the words pressed on him. He remembered Margaret's cookies. He remembered her kindness when he was just a young executive. He remembered how she'd once saved his ruined suit by stitching a torn seam, refusing payment. George looked at Emily again. This woman, who had nothing, had gone out of her way to return something that wasn't even hers. He looked at Thomas, whose eyes were filled with years of struggle and love. Something inside him shifted. "Mr. Reed," he said quietly, "why didn't you just walk in and speak to me?" Thomas looked down. "People like me don't walk up to people like you," he said. That sentence hit George harder than anything. Without saying another word, George asked his staff to escort Thomas to his office. He turned to Emily. "You too," he said softly. In his office, he sat across from them. He took a deep breath and said, "Emily, you did today what most people wouldn't. You trusted your conscience over convenience. That takes courage." Emily blushed. "I just thought it might matter to someone." He nodded slowly. Then he turned to Thomas. "I'll cover your wife's medical expenses, whatever she needs, starting today." Thomas broke down. He cupped his face in his hands. "You don't know what this means to me," he whispered through tears. Emily watched quietly, her eyes glistening. George wasn't done. He dialed his assistant, "Start the process, and also arrange a private nurse and therapy support." When he hung up, he looked at Emily again. "Where do you live?" he asked gently. "In a shelter near the river," she answered. "But it's okay. I manage." "No," he said firmly. "You shouldn't have to just manage." He paused, then added, "If you're willing, I'd like to offer you a job here, in our community relations department. Someone who understands people like Thomas better than most of us." Emily stared at him, speechless. "Me? But I don't have experience." "You have something more important," George replied. "Heart." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She couldn't speak, so she simply nodded. Over the next few weeks, things changed, both inside Miller Enterprises and outside. Margaret received top medical care. Thomas visited her daily with renewed hope. Emily began her job, helping people find resources, support, and dignity. She became a voice for those who felt unheard. Employees noticed a transformation in George, too. He held meetings to discuss how the company could extend help to more families in need. He set up a foundation in Margaret's name to aid people struggling with medical bills. And every time he spoke about it, he credited her kindness from decades ago and the bravery of a young woman who returned a lost envelope. One afternoon, George visited the shelter where Emily once lived. He didn't go with cameras or reporters. He just went to listen, to understand. That day, for perhaps the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a businessman. He felt human. Weeks later, Margaret passed away peacefully, surrounded by her husband and loved ones. At her funeral, Thomas approached George, holding his hand tightly. "You did more than help," he said softly. "You brought back dignity." George, who was usually so composed, struggled to hold back tears. "I didn't," he said. "Emily did." Across the room, Emily smiled. News of the story never reached headlines, but it spread quietly through employees, neighborhoods, and families. And suddenly, people started doing small acts of kindness, returning wallets, checking on neighbors, sharing meals, offering rides, all inspired by someone who believed a lost envelope mattered. Months later, George stood in front of his employees and said, "Success isn't measured by what we own, but by what we give. Wealth means nothing if we can't use it to lift others. Kindness is the greatest investment." Emily stood beside him that day, no longer the girl in a soaked coat, but a confident woman leading initiatives that changed lives. And every time someone thanked her, she would simply say, "I just returned what wasn't mine." Kindness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it enters quietly, like a woman with an envelope, doing what feels right even when no one's watching. It changes more than moments, it changes people. Wealth, power, success, none of that lasts. But kindness, that echoes forever. So today, no matter where you are or what you've lost or gained, choose kindness. Return what someone else might be hoping to find. A smile, a hand, a moment of hope. Because you never know whose life you might touch. And you never know, you might just become the reason someone believes in goodness again. If this story inspired you, please take a moment to subscribe to Kindness Tale, like this video, and share it with someone who might need a reminder of the power of kindness. Comment below, what's one small act of kindness you believe can change someone's day today? Let's spread kindness, one story at a time. Thank you for watching. Stay kind.